Hi there, Malcolm here with my 61st Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you April's wrap up. I didn't do as well as the previous month. I only managed 17 books, but still quite a lot, so let's get cracking. First up was Star Wars Dark Times Blue Harvest. This is a graphic novel chronicling the Jedi Das Jedier in a post-Order 66 universe, where he's trying to find himself in this new world. In this volume, he lands on a planet with two warring gangs and does his best to play one off the other in order to free the people between them from the violence and fear. It read a lot like a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western with some suitably gritty artwork and was an all-round good time. Buy it. Next up was the book of the month, which this time is Doctor Who and the Cricket Men by Douglas Adams and finished off by James Goss. Douglas Adams had written a script for a show or film on the Doctor Who theme, which never got made. James Goss has gone through the original transcripts and notes and has turned it into a pretty readable novel. The story follows the fourth Doctor, the one played by Tom Baker, and his fellow Time Lord companion Lalla Ward, had to face off against an army of robots resembling the players of cricket. For those of you who have read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, particularly Life, the Universe and Everything, there'll be certain plot points which are very familiar. Douglas Adams always liked to recycle stuff that didn't actually get used. But despite that similarity, this is very much its own book, very much its own story. The back contains a few appendices, including Douglas Adams' original treatment of the story. And having read that, James Goss didn't really have to do too much. And I really enjoyed reading something by Douglas Adams that I hadn't already read 100 times already. I would say toward the end of the story, the plot does get away from itself a bit, something that Douglas Adams often struggled with, as well as Doctor Who stories. Highly recommended if you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Doctor Who. You don't need to know much about the Fourth Doctor to appreciate this. Very easy to read. Buy it. After that, it was back to my main reading list. So, on to Goosebumps Chicken Chicken by R.L. Stine. The story follows a brother and sister who repeatedly really annoy the local suspected witch. She wears black, she lives on her own, she has a black cat, she must be a witch, and so they annoy her a lot. And as the story goes, it turns out that she really is a witch, and curses them with the chicken spell, which everyone obviously knows. So they slowly turn into chickens. Shock horror. There was a moral to the story about treating people with respect and all that sort of stuff, but it was very much lost in some awful storytelling, horrible characters. Okay, I know I'm not the target audience, but having read some really good books from the series, this one really was bad. There were no scares, there were no threatening parts. Pathetic jump scares at the end of each chapter really didn't count for anything. And the inevitable twist at the end was just pathetic. I believe it's the first time I've given the lowest score of toilet paper. And after that I read, or after 7 months of reading aloud, The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, book 1 of the Darkwater Legacy. This is a massive fantasy book. The story follows a noble's son called Aaron, who lives in a land that has been conquered by another people. His people are subservient, but he is in the better end of all that. However, it is not long before his father is murdered for treason, and he and his friend are imprisoned. What follows is life in prison, an escape, meeting up with some other freedom fighters, and then eventually, finally, inevitably, we go on a quest. I'm not going to lie, this one has quite a long build-up until the main event. But for those of you who've read Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring also takes a very long time before anything actually happens, really. Filled with some fantastic characters. Chris Wooding does do characters really well. Some you learn to love, some you learn to hate, and then you switch those sometimes as well. As Aaron and Cade, his friend, along with the troop of rebels that they've joined, go through an almost episodic series of events before finally getting to the grand finale and trying to do what they set out to do. I'll try to keep it a bit vague so you can enjoy it when you read it yourself. I do highly recommend reading this. If you've read Lord of the Rings, or if you don't fancy Lord of the Rings because you've tried it and can't get into it, this is a more modern telling Lord of the Rings style. It's not Lord of the Rings, it's a completely different story, but there are similarities. You can see how certain characters could resemble certain characters from the two franchises, but told in a much easier to read way. It also has female characters with significant roles as well. I myself have not read much in the way of fantasy, but was really impressed with this one. Don't be put off by its immense size, it does read very easily. The chapters are actually quite short as well. Booktastic. So after that I then read another Goosebumps book. This one's called Don't Go to Sleep, and was a much better affair than the Chicken Chicken. In this one, Matt in his overcrowded bedroom sneaks into the guest room to have a kip and wakes up in a different reality. His family's not quite the same, the school's not the same, and as it turns out, every time he then goes to sleep, he wakes up in a slightly different reality. Either the world around him's different, or he's different. A different age, a different person, a different creature. I wouldn't say it was scary at any particular point. I certainly felt for Matt's plight in that he wanted to try and get back home. As much as he hated it, it's better than what he has now. You know, one of those not appreciating what you got until you lost it type stories. Unfortunately, what loses it for me on this book is the fact it's a Goosebumps book. I think the premise has been done before. If you've ever seen Sliders, or I think The Simpsons have done it. It's a fun premise where you can have countless different possibilities, but the Goosebumps franchise really did limit what could be done with it. This would have been much better fleshed out in a bigger book. Not necessarily aimed at an older audience. It was entertaining enough as it was. I just wanted more from that. But I would say buy it. It impressed me that much. So after that, it was another Goosebumps book, which was The Blob That Ate Everyone. In this one, a young lad by the name of Zaki manages to acquire an old typewriter on which he wants to write some scary stories. The twist is everything he writes on paper happens in real life. Again, a premise that we have seen elsewhere, but full of great possibilities. Unfortunately, this one was a bit of a mess. The twists were stupid, the cliffhangers were stupid, the characters were annoying. I mean, the best friend that keeps hitting him, I'm not got friends with that. I started enjoying it, but by the end I'd had enough. It was just boring, nonsensical. A real shame. Easy to get through them, one more to go. So the last Goosebumps of the month was actually Goosebumps 2000, Bride of the Living Dummy. My second foray into a Slappy related book. I found The Night of the Living Dummy 3 okay. This one irritated the hell out of me. Something about obnoxious children that clearly haven't had no parenting whatsoever. Every sign of bad parenting at every turn. I started reading it aloud to my wife who's trying to get to sleep. She goes to sleep when I read to her sometimes. We were both annoyed by the second paragraph even. It was just bad. It didn't get much better. It was nice that there was a little bit of the lore behind Slappy added in there. A notebook was found with some of the details about his past. I don't know if that was in book 1 or 2. I've not read those. But it was a nice touch. Just give you a bit of backstory there. But apart from that brief glimmer, this was toilet paper. Now, having read quite a good one, I know they're out there. This one wasn't. So next up was another Star Wars graphic novel. Another Dark Times as well. Out of the Wilderness. Following the events of Blue Harvest, Das Jenner and Ember Chankeli leave that planet as she's asked him to take her somewhere else. As before, she lies, and as a result of that, they end up crash-landed on a different planet entirely. As the name suggests, it was a bit of a wilderness. Another one that reads a lot like a western. This one's more out in the wilderness than in a town. With the same lovely gritty feel to it. Really enjoyable. Interspersed a bit with Darth Vader wanting to find Jedi, as well as an assassin sent to kill Das for the events at the end of Path to Nowhere. And also the crew of the Uhamili, they're also trying to find Das. They decided they want him after all, having lost too many of their own number. There's some great bits of character development, particularly with Das and Ember, from barely tolerating each other to a conclusion where you can tell that they really do have feelings for each other now, in a good way. Buy it. And after that I read Orbitsville by Bob Shaw. Excuse this shocking yellow cover. This wasn't the one I ordered. I've really enjoyed Bob Shaw's works in the past. I would again, and I wasn't disappointed. With only a couple of habitable planets discovered in the entire known universe, a pilot who is responsible for searching out for new life finds himself in hot water when he's placed in charge of the son of the most powerful person on Earth, and he dies. So he grabs his family and skedaddles as quickly as he can, hijacks a ship, and they fly off in the best direction he can think of, where there was a rumoured potential, possibly something there, sort of thing. Despite the somewhat far-fetchedness of convincing a whole bunch of people to take him to this point because it looks like a really good idea for some reason suddenly, this turned out to be a fantastic story, because what they discover there is what we nowadays call a Dyson sphere, which is a construct that completely surrounds a sun. And basically the structure will collect all the energy from the star in every direction, and you live on the inner skin of it, being a surface of equivalent of 5 billion Earths. So suddenly the people in charge of real estate are out of a job. This does explore a bit about that. There's a little bit of exploration as well, sort of akin to Ringworld by Larry Niven, and also Halo by Bungie. Okay, I would admit the exploration is perhaps a little bit thin on the ground, and some of the things that happen are a little bit sort of, really? But I enjoyed every single second of this. It appeared to have a thing buzzing overhead. Helicopter. Bye-bye helicopter. Definitely worth a read and definitely booktastic. Okay, next up I then finished reading Beyond the Deep Woods, book 1 of the Edge Chronicles by Paul Stewart and illustrated by Chris Riddle, to my younger son. A young lad with the interesting name of Twig is raised by trolls? Is raised by trolls and discovers that he's not actually a troll himself and goes off to find out who he is and where he belongs. What follows is an episodic series of adventures where he meets all the crazy creatures on the front cover here. Most are quite unpleasant, some are nice, and then at the end the story finishes. Now this is quite a typical book 1 of a series where the author is still trying to find his feet in telling the story about this world he's created, and it very much is, here's the world and here's some of the funny creatures I've made for it. It reads really nicely, there's some wonderful illustrations in it. My son absolutely loved it. I previously read him The Model Earth duology by the same duo. This one does take a step up in reading age, and there was particularly one scene which was quite heartrending, and he did actually cry a bit with that one. That was a very sad scene. I was moved by it too. You know, Twig was just bumbling along from one thing to the next, and then a thing happens, and it's, whoa, where did that come from? But I suppose where we keep saying, oh, the deep woods are dangerous, the deep woods are dangerous, you actually find out, yes, the deep woods are actually dangerous. I've started reading in book 2 now, and that one does actually follow more of a plot, so looking forward to great things. But for this one, I would say it's worth reading to a child. I did, and that was good. Next up, I read to both my children The Man Who Spoke Dog by my great-uncle Charles Fullerton, with illustrations by Anton. I don't know who Anton is, but he illustrated it. This is a story about a man whose wife divorces him and finds himself extremely lonely and having some sort of a breakdown. And then for some inexplicable reason, he does a Dr. Dolittle and can now talk to dogs, and they can talk to him. I mean, you could already talk to dogs. I mean, anyone talks to dogs. Anyway, what follows is him going through the usual am I going crazy sort of thing, to then, well, what can I do about my new gift? Typically, he is joined by someone who sees his abilities as a means of making money, and the story goes on from there. It's a gentle enough story, very much written of its time, written by a man of a very specific class, of a very specific part of the countryside, for readers of a very similar nature. I myself would have liked to see more dog-talking exploits, but was certainly kept interested in the book because it never really went to the direction I thought it was going to. Very unpredictable, this one, but gentle. However, I would warn people that, again, this was written in a time and a place where people could call black dogs something which would never be actually considered these days. It only features in a couple of paragraphs, but it's there. I enjoyed it enough, it was worth reading. Next up, it's more Star Wars, with the dubious title of Star Wars. Obviously, the series of the Star Wars graphic novel is Star Wars, with the arc In the Shadow of Yavin. I've got the 6 comics that start it. I had to find the extra one that features in the graphic novel itself, which is a free Comic Day comic book from a few years ago, titled The Assassination of Darth Vader. Now, this series is billed as a continuation of A New Hope, pretending that nothing else in the entire franchise exists. So we've literally just had the original first film, and then what happens? The artwork's okay. I find the likenesses change from panel to panel a bit, but you can tell who people are, so, you know, there was a certain stylistic license here. But the story is more of what we've seen before. It's the Rebels versus the Imperials, with TIE fighters and X-Wings and Star Destroyers and planets. I liked some of the changes they put in here. I'm particularly having Leia piloting X-Wings a bit more and actually leading from the front in a lot of the stuff. You know, she's critically injured in a few places and she gets better and then goes on out to fight again. Luke's still the cocky farm boy who wants to do the thing his way. You know, he's played about a bit with the Force, but he still doesn't know much about it. Han's very much the smuggler who's up to no good. Can he be trusted? Can't he be trusted? What helped turn the pages in this one was that it looked like there was a breach of security within the rebellion. Everywhere they went looking for a new planet to hide out on, I think obviously Yavin 4 is now known about, the Empire are there waiting. So there's a bit of intrigue there as well. It's not solved in this issue, but it's there. And then there's some interesting love triangles going on between Luke and a fellow pilot and Leia, because of course Luke and Leia don't know yet. And of course I don't even know if they're related in this branch of Star Wars. But chances are they do, because for everything they changed, there's so much that they didn't. There's Death Star 2s being made around Endor. Mon Mothma's leading the rebellion from the Mon Calamari Star Cruiser Home 1. Boba Fett and Boss go out there hunting Han Solo. So like I say, they changed some things, kept some others. I think I would have preferred a completely new timeline. But anyway, worth reading. I also should mention the assassination of Darth Vader, the one that was included in the collected graphic novel. I had to find it online to read it. That was fantastic. Quite short, not much dialogue, but brilliantly drawn and really action-packed. And it shows a Imperial officer's attempt to assassinate Darth Vader, which obviously backfires horribly for him. And it's got Boba Fett in there, who has the off-again, on-again kind of mutual alliance with Darth Vader. So that was really kick-ass. Then after that, I finished reading the 7th Temperance Brennan book by Kathy Reichs, Monday Morning. In this one, 3 skeletons are discovered in a pizza parlour basement, meaning Temperance Brennan needs to find out who they were, where they came from, with the added confusion as to are they recent or are they archaeological. They are buried with some ancient buttons. What I liked about this was the investigation itself. It was very compelling, it was very interesting. I learnt a lot about carbon dating I didn't know before, and welcomed quite happily. And this one also took some very dark turns, where it ended up I wasn't expecting at all. It's always a bit worrisome that a human being could do that to another human being, and how much of this is going on right now, potentially. The things I didn't like, the romance aspect of it was a little annoying. Will they, won't they relationship with Ryan. Is this unnecessary? It's been dragged out for at least 7 books now. So for goodness sakes. And in this one, he's being even more elusive than normal, and it looks like he's got a little bit on the side anyway. There's a perfectly rational explanation for all this, which we don't find out until right at the end, and it's almost laughable when you find out what it is. It's just like, really? You went for that one? Okay. Why you couldn't just tell her earlier, I don't know. But anyway, it had something to go for it. The better relationship development was actually with her, I won't say nemesis, but with Detective Claudel, a man she never really sees eye to eye with. But by the end of the book, there is something more there than there wasn't there before. That little development there, that was really good. Nice touch. Reading. After that, I read Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, The Salmon of Doubt, by Arvind Ethan David. This was a crazy book that links the 2 and a bit novels written by Douglas Adams, the 2-season TV show starring Elijah Wood, Samuel Barnett, others, Dirk Gently from the books, remembering things that he didn't personally experience from the Dirk Gently version from the TV show. And in some unfathomable way, with a time-travelling bathroom, the 2 timelines merge in somehow. Through that are the various characters from the 2 Dirk Gently's assistants, from both of them, Bart, the holistic assassin from the TV show, up is one complete and utter mess. You have to really know the book back to front and really enjoy and follow the TV show. Have 1 ounce of a Scooby-Doo as to what's going on here. True to the nature of the TV show particularly, it gets more modelled as you go on, and certainly finishes, you just don't know what's going on at all. There's so many dangling lines all over the place. Getting hold of book 2 to actually seeing if anything is wrapped up with that. Fortunately, I think this is planned to be a 3-book series, and book 3 got cancelled. So, yeah. Seeing it though, one detraction, apart from the craziness, was that a lot of the writing does end up in the central crease of the book. Very difficult to read. What was challenging were the different reading styles of each page. Some are landscape, some are portrait, some read left to right, some read down to up. It's more fun trying to work out how you're supposed to read it, but that rather than following the story, you had to stop and go, right, what the hell am I supposed to do with this page? It was alright. It's nice having it interspersed with some very short snippets from the TV show of scenes leading up to what we see on screen. Bart's, not necessarily origin story, but what she was doing before she suddenly got the inkling to go and kill Dirk Gently, whoever he is. From the shows in here to look out for. They're brief. It's worth reading, but only for fans of the show and the books. The uninitiated, certainly. That was more Star Wars. Star Wars Part 2, From the Ruins of Dantooine. And this directly follows on from book 1, obviously. After more adventures and discovery, our heroes finally discover who is the leak. Oh dear. That was not great. I think that was a really bad decision what they did there. Spoil it for you, obviously, if you haven't read it, but you're left guessing and you're thinking, maybe it's that person, maybe it's that person. And I wasn't 100% wrong, but I did like the addition of Perla, who was a character who tried getting a lot of money off Han Solo on Coruscant. They were being chased by Boba Fett and Bossk in the previous book. Of that, able to provide the Alliance with a whole load of stuff, which is really nice of her. Second love triangle between Luke, Perla and Leia. Yeah, Leia's eyeing up all the boys here. He enjoyed her character. Looking forward to seeing what does next. Reading as well. That I read my library book, The Medusa Chronicles by Baxter and Alistair Reynolds. Book in the library written by two of my favourite sci-fi authors. I can't really resist. Based on Arthur C. Clarke's A Meeting with Medusa, a novel that he wrote, and I haven't read, and is, I suppose, a sequel to that. Man had gone and explored Jupiter and discovered floating about in its atmosphere a giant creature, or a race of giant creatures, which call them Medusas. He goes back to find out more about them, but then a whole other bunch of stuff happens as well. The sort of the race, and the machines who want to go off and do their own thing. Stuff happened. I mean, I can't really explain too much because it'll spoil the book for those who want to read it. About 1,000 years by two authors who excel at writing far off into the distant future. Great stuff. Although the main character becomes less and less human as the story goes on, really compelling, and I stuck with him throughout the whole thing. Especially his machine counterpart Adam, who starts off as a machine, becomes more and more human as the book goes on as well, until at the end the two meet and each other. And there's another great twist that happens there. This is very Arthur C. Clarke in terms of the ending of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Better, I think. It's much less sort of what the hell's going on here. There is a logic to it, there is a reason to it, and you can actually follow just why what is going on there, rather than just, okay, we're in a hotel room now. But that at the end, no hotel rooms particularly, but not far off, makes sense and it works for the story. It looks at what it means to be intelligent, what it means to be human. Buy it. Oh, what a long video this is. And there we go, 17 titles. Fantastic ones, truly awful ones, in the middle. If you have a wrap-up you'd like to share with me, then leave a link or a list in the comment section down below. Or, do you have an auto-buy sci-fi author? The one you see and, oh, no, must get that book. Don't care, it's written by them, I'm going to have it. So, comments below. Feel free to add any other comments or thoughts on what I've just shown you. But as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please do keep it to yourself. Thank you. Until next time, see you later.